Good to hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we are going to be learning Maseches Shabbos, Daf Kuf Mem Vav Amud Beis, and Daf Kuf Mem Zayin, as we are catching up from the days in which we did not have Daf Yomi surrounding Tisha B'Av. And Amir Hashem, we will be caught up on Monday night. And we're starting in the bottom of Kuf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, and we're going to move at a quicker clip. It's a blot and a half tonight. And I want to make sure that Hashem will all get a little bit of sleep. So here we go. We're on the bottom of Kuf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, about 12 or maybe even more lines from the bottom. Ein nokvin megufa. We learned in the Mishnah, which is just above us on the top third of the page, and in the middle of that Mishnah it says, "Ve'ein nokvin megufa shel chavis tivi Rabbi Yehuda." You're not allowed to pierce a hole in a barrel. That was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda b'chachamim matirim. And then they also added "V'lo yikaben mitzida," that you cannot pierce on the side. So we have to figure out, where does this machlokes apply? And what does that line mean when it says that you cannot pierce it on the side? So let's start with the Gemara right now. Amar Rav Huna machlokes lamala aval min hatzad divrei hakol aser. According to Rav Huna, it is the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is when you pierce the top, on the top side of the barrel. That's where there's a machlokes masha'inkin on the side of the barrel. Divrei hakol aser b'hainu dekotani. That's what the Mishnah meant when it said lo yikaben mitzida, that you're not allowed to pierce it on the side. That's the shita of Rav Huna. But Rav Chizda argues for Rav Chizda. Amar machlokes min hatzad. The machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim was on the side of the barrel. However, aval al gabo divrei hakol muter. Everyone agrees that you're allowed to pierce a hole on the top. There's nothing wrong with that. So what do they do with the fact that it says, you just said the machlokas, Rav Chizda just wanted to say the machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim was on the side of the barrel. But what do you do with the next part of the Mishnah? What would Rav Chizda do with that? Hasam begufa dechabis. No, we have to make a distinction. The seals on the top was this thing that kind of sat on top. You can pierce the side of that. That's machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. But to pierce the barrel itself on the side, there's no. That's where there's no machlokas at all. That is, everyone is going to agree that that's problematic, and that's what the Mishnah meant with those extra words. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, ein nokvin nekev chadash b'Shabbos. You are not allowed to pierce open a new opening on Shabbos. B'imbala hosif mosif, and if one wants to expand an opening that's already open, it is permissible to do so. The Yesh Omrim, this is all in the Tanaim here. So this is a Yesh Omrim, this is another Shita. The Yesh Omrim ein mosifin. And there are some Shitas that say that you are not allowed to expand an opening. And the Gemara says, V'shavin, these two Shitas agree, Shenokun nekev yashan lechatchila, that if in fact there was a hole that was already made, so you're for sure allowed to reopen, no problem at all. If there was a hole that was plugged up in any way, whatever way it was, you are allowed to reopen it. That would be considered permissible. The Tanakama, the Tanakama who said that you are allowed to expand, that you're mosifin, you're allowed to expand. What was the reason why you said that you can't make a new hole? The reason why, says the Gemara, was because the kamasakin pischa, because you're being masakin kli, you're making something new. So then the Gemara asks, so sufei nami, kamasakin pischa, when you expand your opening, you're also making something new. Your hole was initially a diameter of a few millimeters. Now it's diameter of an inch. Now it's diameter of 7, whatever it is. It's larger. You expanded it from a circle into an oval, whatever it is. Why isn't that also tikkun mana? It should be the same exact thing. Why are you not allowed to open a barrel? You're not allowed to open a can of soda, whatever it is, according to some poskim, as we'll discuss shortly. Why are you not allowed to open a can of soda? But once it's open, you can dig it out wider. You can take a knife and just cut it down and peel it open. Why? Why should that be mutter? That's also tikkun mana. So then here we learn a klal gadol. Omar Rabba, a few lines from the bottom of the page, Davar Torah. Kol pesach she'eno asur lahachnis ulahotzi eno pesach. If there is an opening that does not allow for pouring and entering, for a liquid to go in both directions, or for the food inside to go in both directions, that's not considered an opening. But once an opening is already present, this is the part that's not written in the Gemara, but it's certainly the case. Once there is an opening that's already there, so it's already a Pesach. And to be Mosif, says the Tanakama, is not a prohibition. The Rabbanan, the other sheet was of the opinion, who did Gazor, they had a takana, Mishum Lul Shel Tarnagolim, Da'avid Li'ula Aviru Ula'afuke Hevla. There, we said that we have to be careful by a Lul Shel Tarnagolim, by a chicken coop, where they would make a small hole in the top of the chicken coop to allow first the smell to go out, and also to allow some fresh air to come in both directions. Bimbala hosif mosif, and what does it mean? What do they mean that you're that? So the Rabbanim were saying that's when you're not allowed to make the nekev chadash. What was their concern about hosafa? So there the Gemara says bimbala hosif mosif. You are allowed osufe vadai belul shel tarnagolim lo asi lo osufe. You're not going to make that hole any bigger. We weren't concerned about that in this case. Why not? As we turn to the top of Kuf Mem Vav Amud Beis, Mishum Riksha, because Rashi points out these are Shelo Yikanis Bo Sheretz Kigon Anemia Bechulda. Just we're concerned about rodents. We're concerned about mice. So you'd never make that any larger. So there was no such concern in regards to the little Shel Tarnegol. Says the Gemara, V'yeshomrim. Some say no, not like that. V'yeshomrim ein mosifin. Some say you're not allowed to. Zimnin delo takne meikara, because maybe it really wasn't, the hole wasn't really made the right way the first time. And we're afraid that you may widen it to go from a non-opening to an opening, which is tikkun mana. That's really problematic. Darash of Nachman Shum Rabbi Yochanan halacha ki yeshomrim. We pass in this way that it is ein mosifin. This whole sugya, if you look back at the very beginning of this Tanu Rabbanan in regards to ein open nekev chadash, according to many poskim, this leads to a shaila about opening Coke cans on Shabbos. When I was in Smicha, one of my Rabbi Asaf Bednarch, was of the opinion, he said, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all these companies paid some type of engineer to come up with a pop top that you could just a simple mechanism that would open the bottle in a safe way, nothing sharp sticking out, in an efficient and consistent way. And he felt that this was mamish nekev chadash. You're not allowed to do this. It's not allowed. You're making a new hole. It was never opened before, and you're the one opening it now, and it's already pre-scored, which maybe adds in another complexity of mechatech, of cutting out a measured amount, not pashut. So that, according to some, is problematic, while according to others, it's true you're opening the can, but the whole thing is garbage. Once you finish drinking, nobody refills the can. It's not like a barrel where you pop the top of a barrel with a specific type of mechanism and opening where it stays forever. It's not like that. So there's a machlokas haposkim in regards to metal cans on Shabbos, soda cans, Coke cans, and one should make sure that they speak to their local Orthodox rabbi before opening one of those ever again, because it does require a serious shaila and halacha. And there are other options. You can buy plastic bottles that have plastic tops, which are way less complicated in halacha than it would be in regards to a Coke can, because there, when you unscrew the top of a plastic top, you're not making a nekev chadash. That hole was already there. It's just been covered with a plastic top, which is really separate from the can. It's tightened on, but it's really separate. So that's not a problem. That's less of a problem, I should say. Some poskim are still concerned about the breaking of the rim on the bottom as you turn it and it cracks. So that could be, according to some, also a concern of mechatech, because there's a measured amount of a measured break that's listed there in regards to the very specific size of the rim and then the specific size of the cap. So that's what we're up to now. We're 5 lines. Where are we right now? Wrong page. Here we go. So right now we're 4 lines from the top of the page. That if there was a hole that was pre-existing, then you're allowed to re-pierce that hole. That is considered acceptable according to all opinions. This only applies where you're trying to l'shamer, to protect the flavor of, in this case, the wine. We'll have to see what that means. However, to make the barrel l'chazek, seemingly to make it stronger, we'll see shortly that that's not exactly what that means. That would be problematic. How do we define each of these terms? Rav Chizda was of the opinion, let's say that the wine line in the barrel was at the 3/4 mark. So you're at the 5/6 mark. You're above that line. So that's called the shamer. But if the opening that you're reopening, remember it's a yoshan, you're reopening. If you're below that line, zehu lechazek, that would not be allowed. Rava says lamata min hayayin nami zehu l'shamer, even below the wine line, that would still be considered l'shamer. And according to him, what then would be l'chazek? It's even lower in the barrel, opposite the sediment, opposite that which collects in the bottom of the barrel, the sediment and the dregs and all of the skins, whatever they are, that are sitting. Our wine has been filtered many times over and it's super clean. But that's what the Gemara says here. That is the lechazek according to the shita of Rava. So it says the Gemara, Amar le Abaye, and I think I didn't finish reading. Amar le Abaye le Rava. Abaye says to Rava, who he normally argues with all the time, but here he brings a Mari Makom. He knew about a brisa that supported the shita of Rava. Tanya the Messiah, here's the brisa. Bayis sasum yeshlo arba amos. If there's a house that's completely sealed up, you have 4 amos from the front of the house. Parat says pitzamav ein lo dalet amos. If the door is then opened wide, so then you don't have your dalet amos. You're stuck at the door. No, you can't move anywhere. Next, bayis sasum eino metame kol sevivav. If there's a house that's completely sealed, and even if there's a mace inside, that there's no expansion of the tuma, doesn't go beyond the walls of the house. But parat says pesima, but if the wall has been totally torn down, then it's possible mitame kol seviva that it can expand beyond the house. And this was what Rava felt, what Abaye felt would be a good support for Rava, just speaking about this idea of lechazik, that they are similar in that when you are reopening something opposite the dregs, it has to be very strong. So prior to that, it's considered a seal. And when you put in this new thing, it's lechazik, it's lechozek, you're holding in the wine, it's much stronger. And Abaye felt that this would work for Rava because when the wall is sealed off, so then the tumah doesn't transfer. So they're really different sugyas. It's interesting that Abaye went this route to support Rava because it's a little hard to nail down the comparison, but that is what the Gemara says nevertheless. Says the Gemara about 1/4 of the way down Guvta. What about adding in a spigot? Rav Asar Shmuel. Shari Machlokas Hamoraim. Rav does not allow it. Shmuel does. Now the way they would make their spigot was by using some type of reed, and they would roll it up and affix it to this place where there was a hole. It would be the spigot itself. So where you're making a new one, to cut a fresh one, everyone agrees that that's usher. Ahadure, to put one back that already existed, everyone agrees that if you already had one, then to put it back into an old pre-existing nekev would also be totally fine. So there's no machlokas Rav and Shmuel in that case. Ki pligi, where do they argue? Says the Gemara, that where it's cut, the reed was cut, but it's not cut perfectly. So during the week, you totally would have grabbed a pair of scissors or a knife and you would have sharpened it up to make it a perfect cut. This was not cut perfectly, and this is where we have our machlokas. Manda asar, the shita of Rav, who forbade using a spigot that's made like this gazrin until ma'asil mechtach lechatchila. We're afraid that he may make a mistake and make one that's perfect. Umanda shari, and according to Shmuel, who allows for the spigot to be used when it's made in this poor quality form, lo gazrinan, there's no gazer there. And in fact, this is ketanoi, 1/3 of the way down, kufme above the base. This is similar to a machlokas tanaim in chodchen shepoferes biyom tov ein tzarach lomar b'Shabbos. This is part 1 of the source in the tanaim that says what? That when a tube is to be made, you are not allowed to cut a tube on yontif in order to have the wine flow from a barrel from that tube. You're not allowed to do it on yontif, and all the more so on Shabbos. However, nafla, if it was already created and it fell out, so then the din is machzir no sabes Shabbos vein tzorach lomar b'yontif. The reverse. We have a chumrah in the beginning that says it's not allowed on yontif and all the more so on Shabbos, and then if it fell out, it's allowed on Shabbos and all the more so on yontif. And then we have a unique shita, Rabbi Yoshia Mekel. Rabbi Yoshia is lenient. But the Gemara doesn't even know where to apply Rabbi Yoshia's leniency. And here's why we don't know where to apply it. Rabbi Yoshia Ahaya. Where was he being lenient, says the Gemara. The Gemara says halfway down, Ilema Aresha, if you want to say he was being lenient on the Resha, how come Sakin Mana? We just said you're not allowed to create a new entity here. You're not allowed to create a new tube. That's for sure usher. It's not only usher on Yontif, but all the more so it's going to be usher kal v'chomer. It's going to be usher on Shabbos. You're being makel on that. That's mamash and isser doraisa. You're not allowed to be makel there. That can't be where Rav Yoshia was going to be makel. So if that's the case, ela a seifa. If you want to say it's on the seifa, but the seifa was mutter. The seifa, we said if the hose falls out, you're allowed to put it back in. So what are you being makel on, Rav Yoshia? I'll just read it in the Gemara. Ela seifa tanakama nami mishra kashari. He also agrees that it's mutter not only on Shabbos, but all the more so on Yontif. So what does Rabbi Yoshia mean? It can't be the Reisha and it can't be the Seifa. Answers the Gemara. Ella, what are they arguing about? They're arguing about they're arguing about the same thing that we just saw that Rav and Shmuel were arguing about something that was cut but not cut perfectly. Marsavar Gazrinan and Marsavar Lo Gazrinan, and those are the sources in the Tanaim where we see as a precedent for the shitas of Rav and Shmuel, one says Aser, one says Mutter, and that is reflected in these sources in the Tanaim. Darash of Shisha, Bered, Rav Idi, Mishmed, Rav Yochanan, Halachak, Rav Yoshi, and in fact we paskin like him that when it comes to this reed that's not made perfectly, and you want to put this reed, which is a spigot effectively, into a hole that was pre-existing, halacha is according to Rav Yoshia that it's mutter to do so, even though it's not cut perfectly. We are not concerned that you're going to come and do a secondary cut in order to make it fit perfectly. 2 dots, a little bit more than halfway down. V'im ha'isen akuva, we said you're not allowed to put down any wax. This is again the Mishnah Kufman above Madalab at the top. You're not allowed to put in wax because that's mimareach. You're not allowed to spread it out. So it says the Gemara Mishcha. What about thicker oil? how does that play out? Is that mutter or is that asr? So says the Gemara, that's a machlokas amoraim too. Rav asar u'shmuel shari. Man de asar, according to Rav, who forbids it, gazrin and mishum shava. We're concerned that we're going to mix this up with wax, which has a very thick consistency. Ashein came this oil, which is thinner, but still he was concerned. Man de shari, Shmuel, who permitted to use this type of mishcha, this thicker oil, lo gazrinan, no concern at all. Omar le Rav Shmuel bar Chana Rav Yosef. Befeirush itmar amrislan, Befeirush amrislan mishmei de Rav mishchashari. I learned the exact opposite, and I heard it befeirush, that it's perfectly permissible, even according to Rav, to use this thicker oil. Amar Tavus Rishba, that's a person's name. Amar Shmuel. Hi Tarfa de Asa, this is a particular myrtle leaf. So you're not allowed to use that on Shabbos. My taima, the reason why you cannot use it is because Rav Yemar Medifti Amar Gzer Mishum Marzev. We are concerned about a marzev. Rashi says, Dibur Hamaschel Gzer Mishum Marzev Shema Yachin Marzev. Maybe you'll build a spigot of your own from scratch, similar to the concern that we had above. Rav Ashi Amar Gzer Shema Yiktom. The concern here is not that. The concern is that we're afraid that you're going to clip off the leaf on Shabbos, which is itself asr. So either way, it would be problematic. My beinahu. What's the difference between these two shitas? What if it's pre-cut? So then, according to the shita that it's pre-cut, it would then be mutter to do it. According to the shita that we're concerned about making a marzev, about making another spigot, so then that's already still going to be usher, even if it's cut. Says the Gemara Beisadja. What about walking outside with sheets of felt? So the halacha is Rav Asar Shmuel Shari. You're not allowed according to Rav, and Shmuel says it's permissible. But the Gemara now qualifies where this machlokas Rav and Shmuel applies. So berachin, if the garments are very soft, if they're pliable, you can wrap them around your body nicely. It's as if you're really wearing a garment. Berachin, the kule amalo pligi de shari, everyone agrees that's allowed. Bekashin, if it's stiff as a board, if the felt is very stiff, the kule amalo pligi de asr, everyone agrees that that's not allowed. Ki pligi, where's the machlokas Rav and Shmuel b'mitzeh? When it's kind of neither here or there. It's not super soft. It doesn't wrap perfectly around your body, but it's not so stiff. It's kind of in the middle. So under those circumstances, what do we say? Man de asar, according to Rav, who says that it's forbidden. It looks like you're carrying, and that's not appropriate on Shabbos. And according to Shmuel, it doesn't look like that, and it's therefore permissible to carry this semi-firm felt. And this shita of Rab about the felt was not said explicitly; it was only inferred. Rab went to a particular place. There wasn't a space for him. So what happened? He went outside and he sat down on the ground. In a carmelis, no problem. This must have been during the weekday, something where it's permissible to carry things because of the next line. They brought him a piece of felt to sit on. Lo yosib, and he didn't want to sit on the felt. Why not? So maybe man de chaza, if you were watching this, maybe you would have thought, Savar, you could have thought, Mishum de Beisadja Asar, maybe he held that the Beisadja is Asar to carry. It's something he's just trying to teach a din. So the Gemara says, below, that's not the case. To Rav, Achruze Machras Beisadja Shari, no. He held that it was totally mutter to carry this middle tier type of felt that doesn't conform perfectly, but is also not super firm. It's permissible. There's nothing wrong with that. So why wouldn't he sit on it? Because Mishum Kavod Rabosenu lo yashavala. He didn't want to sit on it because there were other Rabbanim who needed a space to sit. And the Gemara even details who they are. Umaninhu, who were these Rabbanim that Rav was giving cover to? The Gemara says, Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, these two great Rabbanim. Rashi, the Ramaschal, Rav Kahana, Rav Asi, the last Rashi on the Gemara, about 10 or 12 lines up from the bottom of the page. Rashi says, the Ramaschal, Rav Kahana, Rav Asi, Talmidei Chaverim Hayula. They were not Talmidim, they were not Rabbeim, they were Talmud Chaver, which is a blended type of relationship, one that we will see many times throughout Shas and Yirtzeh Hashem as we navigate together. Says the Gemara at the Mishnah, 12 lines from the bottom. If you have a hot bowl of food, a hot pot of food, and you want to keep it warm, you're allowed to stick it in a pre-made hole in the ground, no problem at all. And the ground is a good insulator. It's not hatmana, you're not covering it on all sides, but you're going to just keep it in the ground and keep it warm. Next in, you're allowed to take water that you plan on drinking and put it into water that is gross, so that it can cool down. Better to drink the water cold. Seems pretty obvious. What's wrong with cooling something off? We'll see in the Gemara what that conversation's about. If there's something that's cold, you can put it in the sun. We saw this earlier in the Maseches. Of course, you're allowed to warm things up directly in the sun. There's nothing wrong with that at all. We'll have to answer that question too. Next case, a person is walking on the path. and their clothes get sopping wet. They're all wet. You're allowed to walk in them. No concerns about wearing the wet clothes. When you get to the outer chutzner of the place where you live, so then the din is you're allowed to lay it out on the ground, but you're not allowed to do it in front of other people. Very unique. We'll have to see why that's the case. Says the Gemara on case number 1, you just said that we're allowed to put food into an empty hole in the ground. Says the Gemara, Pshita, thank you very much. Of course that's permissible. Answers the Gemara, no. You might have thought that you're not allowed to put the pot into the ground because maybe you're going to move around the pot to smooth it out so that the pot will sit nicely and you'll smooth out the bumps in the ground. Mashva gumos. Kamashma, we're not concerned about that. Next, 5 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara, you're allowed to put water that is hot into water that is cold, again, in a pot, to cool it down so that you can drink cooler water. Says Gemara Pshita. Again, it's so obvious. Of course you can cool something down. Our concerns are bishul, not cooling things down. It's the exact opposite. So what did the Gemara mean? Says the Gemara, you're right. Seifa is trichale. I didn't need it for the resh, I needed it for the seifa. What does the seifa say? We just learned it. Says the Gemara, that you're allowed to put cold water in the sun. Hanami pshita. That's obvious. These things are clear to us. We understand this already. We know it's mutter. Says Gemara, no. The concern of the Gemara was that when we were to put something into other water, put one pot into other water, we might have made the error of assuming that I could also put it into ash that's still warm from before Shabbos, kamash malan, that we're not concerned about that mix-up, and therefore you can put it into the water even to warm it up. Mishanasher, your clothes are sopping wet. A very important halacha as it relates to maris ayin. This is halacha l'maisa. We'll see shortly that we pass in this way. The din is that when there is a din of maris ayin, it applies everywhere, even when you're by yourself in your apartment. The Dugma, the Rama gives an example in Shulchan Aruch that if you're eating milk that's derived from almonds, this is commonplace for us. We have almond milk. Many of us have it in our fridges. I think we have some that we drink on Shabbos when we're fleshing. So what do we do with that? If you're drinking that, a cup of almond milk with meat, so the Ramban Shulchan Aruch recommends to have some almonds out, because that way people will know that you're from, they'll know that's Maris Ayin, but it applies. Afilu b'chedrei chadarim. So that's a classical din of Maris Ayin. But then says the Gemara, if that's true, then I don't understand our Mishnah. Tanan, what did we learn? Shodchan b'chama, you're allowed to lay them out. Avalo keneged ha'am, you're allowed to do it when nobody's looking. What do you mean? Maris Ayin can't be done even when nobody's looking. So why does our Mishnah say that you're allowed to do it when nobody's looking? It's either Maris Ayin, in which case it's us or when no one's looking, or it's not Maris Ayin, and it should be mutter then. So manavshach. This doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense. So answers the Gemara, you're right, it doesn't make any sense because it's Tanai, it's Machlokes Tanaim. Last line, Kuf Mem Vav Mem Beis, let's keep going. To Tanya, the Brisa writes, Shodchan B'chama Avalo Keneged Ha'am. We have one Shita that agrees with our Mishnah, yet we have another Shita that disagrees. Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon, Osrin. This is the way we hold. We hold that Maris Ayin applies afilu b'chedrei chadarim, and our Mishnah is not a Mishnah that we paskin like Ladina in regards to Maris Ayin. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, Hamenaer taliso b'Shabbos chayav chatas. Someone who shakes off their talis on Shabbos, they are obligated to bring a korban. Machlokes Rashi Tosfos. Take a look at Rashi. Dibur hamaschel hamenaer taliso min ha'afar. If you get some dirt on your sleeve, are you allowed to brush it off on Shabbos? What did Tosfos say? Tosfos says, Dibur hamaschel hamenaer taliso pirish Rabbeinu Chananel minatal she'alav. If there's dew on it, tahainu kibus v'libun chayav chatas. Wow. So Rashi says we're talking about dust on our suit, and Tosfos says we're talking, Tosfos Rabbeinu Chananel, they say that we're talking about water on our suit. Let's continue the Gemara. When does this Isser de Oraisa of cleaning off your clothes apply? Lo amar nela b'chadati aval ba'atiki les lanba. It only applies by new clothing, but not by old clothing. Lo amar nela be'ukmi. It only applies by black clothing. Aval b'chibri v'sumki, if the clothing is white or if the clothing is red, no problem at all. Les lanba. V'hu dekapid alayhu. Another parameter is that you have to care. How does Rashi define if you care? Very powerful idea, simple. Rashi says, Dibur hamaschel b'hu dekapid alayhu, on the second line of the page, L'loshan ad she'inarim. I'm not going to wear them until you brush off the dust. That's called makbid. But if you're willing to wear it even without taking off the dust, then you're allowed to take off the dust. But if you know that you wouldn't wear it without taking off, then that's called kapid. That's called being makbid, and then you're not allowed. This is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. The Shita of the Bali Tosfos is quoted within the Shulchan Aruch that we should be careful about water, and the Ramah adds in we should try to be makbid even for the Shita of Rashi that is talking about dust as well. Continues the Gemara 4 lines down. Ula ikla Pumbedisa. Ula went to the city of Pumbedisa. Chazar Rabbanan to come and He saw that there were some Rabbanim who were cleaning off their clothes. Omar, he could barely hold himself back. Omar, what are you doing? You're all being Mechal Shabbos. How could you do that? It's totally usher. Look at the din that we just learned from Rav Huna. How could you do that? Amar Lahu, they said to Amar Lahu Rabbi Yehuda, Nefutze le be'ape. You guys can clean off your shirt right in front of his face. No problem at all. Why? Because anan lo kaptin and midi, because we don't care. And that was one of the parameters that Rav Huna. So apparently Rav Huna didn't know that they were makbid. Not Rav Huna. Apparently, who was here? Sorry. This was Ula. Ula wasn't aware of the parameter that hakpada was one of them. So where this took place in Pumbedis, nobody cared. So it's totally fine. Abai have a koi comment to Rabbi Yosef. Abai was standing with Rabbi Yosef. Abai was a 4th century Amora, and Rabbi Yosef was a 3rd century Amora, so maybe a Rebbe. Amarle, and the Rebbe said to him, Havli kumtoy, give me my hat. So Chaza, the Ikatala, when he was picked up his hat, he saw that there was some dew on the hat, seemingly a raya for the sheets of Tosfos and the Rabbeinu Chananel, because the example that the Gemara gives is with liquid. Maybe that's why the Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. And Havakam Achasim, and as he was hemming and hawing, he like hesitated a little bit. Lemesve, he didn't want to give it to him. Lemesve. Sorry, let me read that smoothly. So Chazav the Ika Talala, he saw that there was a dew on it, and Havakam Achasim Lemesve, he was hesitating to give it to Rav Yosef. And I taught this on Shabbos, and I missed this point, and David Merzel highlighted, Rav Yosef was blind. Yet, nevertheless, what was his response? Omar Le, Rav Yosef said back to Avai, Nefos Shadi, don't worry, you can throw off the water, no problem at all. Anan lo kaptin an midi. We here don't care if there's water on our hands. Now, what the point of him being blind is that he was noticing the hesitation of pause, potentially, in conversation. That's what Avi Stein explained. That was his parish here as well, that there was a pause, there was a hesitation. Rav Yosef picked it was like too long of a pause. There must be something on the hat, and he doesn't know that you're allowed to shake it off. So then he told him, "We're not makbid." Next case. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Amar Rav Yochanan Yotze b'talis mikutas menechas al ksefo b'Shabbos chayav chatas. Someone who walks outside with a talis with a garment that's folded up on their and placed on their shoulder, they're chayav chatas. Tanya Namihachi. The Brisa writes this in a variety of ways, and here we are going to go through this pretty quickly. Sochrei ksus hayotzim b'talisas mikupalas menechas al kisvei b'Shabbos chayav chatas. People who sell clothing and they have it folded on their shoulders, they're going to be chayav chatas. V'lo sorchei ksus bilvad. It's not only them. Amru. It doesn't only apply to them. Ela kol adam. It applies to everyone else. Shadark and shalmochrim. Let's say skach. That's just the way that the sochrim would walk around. What about a bechenvani, a store owner? Bechenvani hayotze b'mos hatzurin lo b'sadino. Someone who has their money tied up in their clothes. Chayav chatas. They're obviously going to bring a korban because you can't carry on Shabbos. It doesn't only apply to the store, nor it applies to everyone. Which is normal for him. Either that was a location or people who were runners. Rahit in Aramaic is a runner. The Gemara will see in Bava Kama is that it says, Shitin rihute rihat, lomata lagavar the mitzafra karach. 60 running people cannot catch someone who ate breakfast. We'll get there then. But the word rahat does mean runner, so machlok is what the word means. Haritanim, these people, yotzin besudarmu, they were allowed to go out with these types of hair coverings that would drape onto their shoulders, and that's fine. Below retanim bilvad, it's not only by them that's mutter. Ela kol adam ela shadarko shel retanim laseis bekach. It applies to everyone. We just spoke about retanim because they're the classic example of it. They're the ones who do it most. Says the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Ma'aser b'Horkanes ben Osher Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanes. Sheyatza v'sudar shal ksefo b'Shabbos elo shanim akrucha lo be'etzbo. He wore out a garment over his head and he tied this thing around his finger to make sure he wouldn't make an error with what he was doing. Uksheba davar lifnei chachamim amru afilu eini makrucha lo be'etzbo. You don't need the hair wrapped around your hand to remind you. It's just mutter like the Retanim to wear it that way. The Gemara adds, Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda Mishmei to Rav Chizda halacha afal pisha enim akruch labetzbo. So a repeat of the same thing that you don't have to wear this thing around your finger to remind you about it. Ulek lebe Asi bar Hini. Ula went to the house of Asi bar Asi bar Hini. We learned about a marze, but it's a spigot, right? No, not here. This is one of the most challenging parts of Gemaras when we have the same word that has multiple definitions and they are literally an amud apart. So let's see what this means. The Gemara is going to think God explain it for us. My marze, you're not allowed to make a marze. What's a marze? It's when you wear your scarf in a way where there are like folds in it that generates these kinds of pockets of some kind in the scarf as you fold them. Certain types of folds. Rav Yirmiyah Havi Yosef commented Rav Zera. Rav Yomi was sitting in front of Rav Zera and he asked a whole bunch of shilas in this regard. Amar le hachamai, what if I fold it this way? Amar le aser, would be aser. Hachimai, how about folding it this way? Would it be aser? Amar le aser, yes, it would be. We don't know what these means. What is the hacha? We have no idea what this means. So the Gemara allows us to have a little bit of insight by laying down the law here with a yesod. Amar papa nakod hay klala b'yadcha. Take this following as a guideline. If you're doing something in order to be able to carry things, in other words, it makes pockets, that is going to be aser. But if you're doing it just to make it look nicer, then even if it has pockets, but your intent is otherwise, that would then be permissible. How about he would dress up in a very regal way, where he would wear these garments in a very nice way, and therefore it was permissible, no problem at all. He was wearing this garment wrapped around his head and draping over his shoulders in a particular way. Rashi tries to explain, difficult for us to really perfectly comprehend, not so clear. But he was wearing it on his the way he was wearing it. Amar lafanav Yehoshua ben Ziruz ben Chamav shel Rabbi Meir. This person, Yehoshua ben Ziruz, was, just follow along, Yehoshua ben Ziruz was the son of the father-in-law of Rabbi Meir. So he was married to Bruria, which means that this was the son of the father of, seemingly this was Bruria's brother. Yehoshua ben Ziruz was Bruria's brother. And he said to Rabbi Huda Hanasi, who was wearing this the way that he was wearing it, and he says, Shall Rabbi Meir bezu, Rabbi Meir, bezu lo chiev Rabbi Meir chatos. The way you're wearing it, aren't you afraid of Rabbi Meir? He of course would have said it was a chiyuv chatos. Amar lei, Rabbi said back to him, Diktek Rabbi Meir ad kan. Wow, I didn't realize how far he went. And instantly, shil shel Rabbi Taliso, he let it down. He didn't realize that the way he was wearing it would have been problematic. Kiyasa Ravin, Amar, Ravin comes along to just fact check the story. No. Lo Yehoshua ben Ziruz hava, ela Yehoshua ben Kusai hava, chasano shel Rabbi Akiva, the son of Rabbi Akiva. It was just a different person who said this to Rabbi. Amar bezu lo chiev Rabbi Akiva. Don't you know my father-in-law Rabbi Akiva would have said this is aser. Bezu lo chiev Rabbi Akiva chatas. Amar lo, he said back to him, diktik Rabbi Akiva ad kan. Wow, I didn't realize how far Rabbi Akiva instead of Rabbi Meir went with his din. So then Shil Shal Rabbi Taliso, and then he lowered it down. And then still a third version of the story. Kiyas Rab Shmuel bar Rab Yehuda Omar Nishal Itzbar. No, this was a question that Rabbi was asking. It wasn't a story that actually took place in regards to he wore it in this way and he actually violated Nisr. No, it was just that he was asking a question. Mishnah Bottom Kuf Mem Zayin Amar. Says the Mishnah, Harochetz b'mei me'aruv meitzver v'nistapeg afilu b'eser aluntios lo yivim b'yado. If you go into the waters of Mei Me'ara, cave water, or Meitzver, the waters of Tveria, and you're one person who uses 10 towels, you cannot carry the towels. We'll see in the Gemara why that's the case. But what about the other way? If you have 10 people who use one towel, that's way more moisture in one towel, much more likely to violate schita. Nevertheless, we see there that it's mutter to you, mavin or somebody other, you're allowed to carry it back home, obviously in a place where there's an eruv. We have to figure out in the Gemara what that means. Next case in the Mishnah, sachin u'mamashmashin, you're allowed to use oil and rub it on your body, avalomis alman v'lomis karin, you're not allowed to massage it in, and you're not allowed to scratch off the skin. In Yordan the kordima, we'll see not tomorrow, but the next day what kordima is. We'll see tomorrow what kordima is. Ve'ein osin apiktivizin, you cannot make something that will make you throw up, an emitic. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Ve'ein ma'at v'nesakatan, you cannot straighten out the limbs of a katan. Ve'ein machzir nesashever, you're not allowed to fix a broken bone on Shabbos. In other words, align the broken bones. Mishinifraka yada v'raglav, if you have dislocated your hands or legs, lo yitrafim betonin, you should not treat them with cold water. Aval rochet ukedarko b'misrape nisrape, you should just do a regular wash with water, and if it heals you, then great. Katani, what did we see in our Mishnah? Mei Ma'ara Dumei de Mei Tveria. They are included together, the cave water and the water of Tveria. Well, therefore, what's their common denominator? Ma Mei Tveria chamen af Mei Ma'ara chamen. Both of them are allowed to be hot. That's point one. Point two, harochetz diavad in lechatchila lo. The language of harochetz, the one who washed, not rochetz, and not you can, that it's mutter, but harochetz implies something that's not really lechatchila. So these two things put together leave with the following diuk. Michlal, turning to the top of Kufim Zayin of Beis, what is the diuk that is left with us? That the inference is that you're allowed to pour water over yourself, even the chatchila, even when it's hot. Rashi, the Brahmaskal, shofchan al gufa, delav derech rechitzahi, shari lechatchila filu b'cham. You're allowed to pour it over you, but whose shita is that? Money. Who says that? That's not our Mishnah. That's Gemara. Reb Shimon he. The time lo yishtatef adam ben b'cham and ben mitzvah Reb Meir. Reb Meir's makbet of both hot and cold are not allowed. Reb Shimon matir. He allows everything. You're allowed to pour that hot water or cold water on you, no problem at all. Yehuda Omer b'cham and aser b'tzon and mutter. He's the only one who allows the hot water. So therefore, our Mishnah must be within the shita of Reb Shimon. What is this weird thing going on in the Mishnah that one person can't carry back 10 towels? That's a tenth of all the water on his body spread out over 10. How much water could there be in a towel? Even if the towels back then weren't as absorbent as ours, but it wasn't sopping wet if you used 10. And then what happens when you have 10 people using one towel? These crazy cases. Why is that the case? So it says the Gemara 4 lines down. Resha Rabusa Kamashmalan Vasefa Rabusa Kamashmalan. We learned something from the Resha and from the Sefer Resha, where we said that one guy cannot carry any of the 10 towels back. Ravusa Kamashmalan Dafilu Hani Delon Fishibu Maya came in the Chad who Asilide Schita. We're afraid because there's no one as a checks and balances that he may come to do schita. We don't allow for that to take place. The Seifa, what about the case where 10 people are not allowed to, where 10 people use one towel, we're allowed to carry that towel back, Ravusa Kamashma, what does that teach us? Even when there's a lot of water, because there's a lot of people there, we're not concerned. There's people are going to remind you, it's not a problem. Midkare ahadade, one will remind another. Tanu Rabban, the rabbis taught us, you are allowed to use a towel, put it down on the window, but you're not allowed to hand it over to the person who runs the bathhouse. We're afraid that they're going to do the laundry on Shabbos to squeeze it out. This is not our Mishnah. What did we learn in our Mishnah? We learned that one person is not allowed to do this. One person is not allowed to carry it home. We see here that one person is allowed to carry it home. Who do we paskin like? Do we paskin like this new source here? Do we paskin like our Mishnah? It says the Gemara, Amar Le, HaReb Shimon, HaRebbi, HaShmuel, HaReb Yochanan. All 4 of them have shitas that say the same exact thing, and therefore the din is like them. Reb Shimon Hada Amra. Reb Shimon was our case that we saw that that it's permissible for a person to do this. Reb Yochanan, what's next? Shimon Hada Amra. Rebbe Titania. Omar Rabbi Kshahinu Lamedin Torah Eitzel Rabbi Shimon b'Tekoa, when they were up in the city of Tekoa, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful area. So then Hainu Malin Shemin Va'alontis Mechatzer Lagag Megag Lekarpef, they would bring up oil and a towel from the Chatzer to the roof, and from the roof to a karpef. Hainu Magian Eitzel Ma'ayon Sheinu Rochzimbo. They would do that, and then they bring the towel back. So therefore, we see that it's permissible to bring the towel back. Shmuel da Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel mistapeg adam balontis mevia b'yado l'tzoch beiso. Very blunt that you're allowed to take a towel and bring it back into your house, just like we were trying to say. Rabbi Yochanan da Amar Reb Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha mistapeg adam balontis mevia b'yado l'tzoch beiso. That he too, Rabbi Yochanan, was all 4 say the same thing. So therefore, one is allowed to take their towel to the mikvah, and they're allowed to bring it home even if it's wet. You can't do schita, but we're not concerned that you're going to do schita. But just on the last sheet, where we saw that Rabbi Yochanan was aligned with this idea as well, the Gemara asks as follows: how could Rabbi Yochanan say that? Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam mishnah. We always follow a stam mishnah, says Rabbi Yochanan. And the Tanan, what does the stam mishnah say? What does that mean? You're not allowed. Even if you use 10 towels, you're not allowed. So we see that that's not like all the 4 shitas that we just saw. And Rabbi Yochanan, how could you be one of those 4 shitas? You don't agree with that yourself because you hold like a stam mishnah. And we see in a stam mishnah, even if you use 10 towels, you can't bring them home. So which one is it, Rabbi Yochanan? Says the Gemara, Hahu, the Mishnah that you just quoted is missing words. It should say, Kiben chachinoi, masnila. You should teach it with the words, Kiben chachinoi. That was their shita. This is not a stam Mishnah. You're right. Normally, Rabbi Yochanan holds like a stam Mishnah, but this wasn't stam. It's missing some words. And it was like the opinion of Ben Chachinoi. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ha'ulyorin, Mivin, Balari, Nashim, Lebei, Bane, that the launderers are allowed to bring towels for women into the bathhouse. Women, of course, so to be modest. They have to cover themselves, they have to drape themselves in the towels so that it wasn't carried. Saknisa, this was some type of head covering, a handkerchief that one would wear over their head, but it was a little bit longer, as we'll see shortly. Tzarech l'kasher beis roshe, you have to tie it down on your body in order to make sure that lemata, to make sure that it doesn't fall off. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Rav Yochanan lemata mikseifaim, even under your, had to be under your shoulders, seemingly around your armpits or something like that. It was tied around the body in that way. Amar Rava lebnei mechoza, Rava was said to bnei mechoza, When I bring kelim, when I bring these things to the soldiers, I make sure that it's all tied up below your shoulders so that there's no issur of carrying. Of course, talking about the sachnisa, these types of handkerchiefs. Sachin mamashmashin, we said Tan Rabbana, sachin mamashmashin, you're allowed to use oil and put it on your body, on your stomach, b'Shabbos, no problem at all. But it has to be different than you do during the week. What should you do? Rabbi Chama bar Chanina Omer Sach ve'achar kach mamashmesh. One says you put on the oil and then you rub it in. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Sach mamashmesh b'asachat. It's all the same. Just rub it in at the same time. No problem. Avalomis amlin. You're not allowed to massage it in. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan Asher lamod bekarkiisei shal diyumsis. You're not allowed to go into the earth to stand in there of the yumsis of this. It's a body of water. Because it doesn't actually massage you, obviously, but it has the healing effects of that. And it heals you. This was only a 21-day experience, I should say, with Yumsis. It was a very small amount of time that these had healing powers. And what would happen was that during those days, they would heal you. But there was also Shavuos in those 21 days. So ask the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down, Kufim Zayin with base. So when was that Tzeres? During the 21 days, in the beginning or in the end? So the Gemara tries to give an answer. Tashma, Amar Shmuel, Kulu Shakiani, all of the waters, B'divcha V'ada Tzarta from Pesach, Divcha Zevach from the Korban Pesach, Aviada Tzarta, Malu. That's very helpful for you. So we see at Tzeres is at the end. Seemingly it should be here too, says the Gemara. No raya that it should be at the end. Dilma Hasan. By that case, maybe we should say Hasan with the kama the karir alma male. Maybe there, if the medicine just functioned differently, it may have just been a medicine that worked better under colder circumstances. About hacha here, maybe mishum havlahu. Maybe just when it's warmer out, it's better. Kevin the chamim alma. When the world is warm, it's fema. You can't compare one to the next. Last little sugya for the night. A powerful story. Amar Rabbi Chalbo, Chamra de Prugisa, a very special kind of wine, and Umaya de Yumsis, and this water that only was around for 21 days, it led the Jewish people astray. Kipchu Aseres HaShvatim Yisrael, it's what led off 10 Shvatim from the Jewish people. Rachmana litzlan. And there was also a yid later than that, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, one of the Tanaim. Ikla lahasam imshach basrai. He got drawn in after the wine of progisa, and the waters of Dumsis. He got drawn in, and he had an awful consequence. Yakar Talmude. He forgot all of his Torah. God forbid. It's hard enough to learn it the first time. Let's forget it all. Then he came back to his community. He was supposed to lane that week. He was supposed to read the pasuk of Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, but he lost all of his Torah. So Nebuch, Amar, what did he say? He couldn't read. He forgot everything. So everybody felt bad for him. When people realized what had happened, they started davening for him and he got his memory back. And this is what the Mishnah writes. Rav Nehorai, we'll see soon that Rav Nehorai was a homily for Rav Elazar ben Arach. Rav Nehorai, Omer, he said, Habigola lamakom Torah, you should go to a place where there's Torah. Your friends will be the ones that support you. Don't rely on your own understanding. Tana lo Rav Nehorai Shemo, his real name wasn't Rav Nehorai. Ella, what was it? Ella Rav Nechemya Shemo. It was a different person. And this connects back to our Gemara. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach Shemo. No, Rav Nehorai was really Rav Elazar ben Arach. Why did we call him Rav Nehorai? Rav Nehorai Sheman here Eini Chachamim beHalacha, because he was able to make bright, to make beautiful, to make the Torah shine in the eyes of his Talmudim. We will stop here for tonight at these two dots on the bottom of Kuf Mem Zayin and Beis. Mir Hashem pick up tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful week. Shavua Tov.